Lesson was deliberate. If you work exclusively for a salary, you blind yourself to the mechanics of the business itself. The rich do not trade time for money. They use work environments to extract specific skills and identify hidden market inefficiencies. Imagine a man with multiple advanced degrees, a prestigious government job, and a brilliant academic mind who spends his entire life suffocating under a mountain of debt. Now imagine a high school dropout who barely reads books, yet quietly builds a real estate and business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Robert Kiyosaki experienced this paradox firsthand as he grew up under the influence of two very different fathers. His biological father, the poor dad, represented the pinnacle of academic success. He held a PhD and studied at elite institutions like Stanford, following the exact resume society claims guarantees a secure life. Yet despite a high salary, he lived in a constant state of financial anxiety, juggling overdue bills and eventually facing bankruptcy. He was entirely exhausted, overworked, and broke. His struggle illustrates a jarring reality. Academic prestige often fails to translate into financial stability, as even the highest degrees provide no instruction on how money actually functions. Kiyosaki once met an English literature PhD facing foreclosure. She asked him for advice to save her home. He told her to take a low-level sales job, selling cars, selling real estate, anything to learn how to move capital. She was deeply offended. She felt that her intellectual pedigree placed her above the gritty reality of commerce. Our school systems actively breed this specific disdain for money. They train students to be incredible technicians, writers, or engineers, but leave them illiterate when it comes to reading a financial statement or selling a product. This spinning wheel illustrates the resulting trap, the rat race. Without financial intelligence, smart people become entirely dependent on employers and the government. They are driven by a fear of poverty, forcing them to work, and a desire to consume, forcing them to spend. Because traditional schools leave this massive gap in a child's education, wealthy parents intervene. They bypass the school system entirely and deliberately install a totally different financial operating system into their kids. The first intervention is strict control over vocabulary. When a child from a wealthy family wants something expensive, they are forbidden from using a specific phrase. The traditional middle-class reflex is to say, "I can't afford it." It is a definitive statement. The moment those words are spoken, the brain shuts down. The problem is dismissed, and the child accepts defeat. The wealthy parent forces the child to ask a question instead. How can I afford it? This interrogative instantly boots up the brain's problem-solving centers. It forces the mind to scan the environment for entrepreneurial solutions and untapped resources. Repeating these linguistic choices over decades compounds. One phrase hardwires a child for passive acceptance of their economic class. The other hardwires them for active, aggressive wealth creation. To break the psychological addiction to a steady paycheck, Kiyosaki's rich dad, a high school dropout who built a massive business empire, used an unconventional training method. He made a young Kiyosaki work in his convenience store for 10 cents an hour. A few weeks later, he dropped the wage to zero. The lesson was deliberate. If you work exclusively for a salary, you blind yourself to the mechanics of the business itself. The rich do not trade time for money. They use work environments to extract specific skills and identify hidden market inefficiencies. Forced to look past a paycheck, the unpaid kids noticed that the store manager was throwing away unsold comic books. They gathered the discarded inventory, opened a reading room in a basement, and charged neighborhood kids 10 cents for admission, building a highly lucrative independent business. Working purely for a salary ties your survival to an employer's whims. Working to acquire knowledge creates leverage you own forever. Wealthy families operate on a specific mechanical distinction that rarely appears in a classroom, the redefinition of assets versus liabilities. Look at this balance sheet. The standard middle-class myth dictates that your primary house and your car are your biggest assets. But notice the red arrows. These items require property taxes, maintenance, insurance, and interest payments. They constantly drain cash. The wealthy perspective is different. An asset is strictly something that puts money into your pocket, whether you are awake or asleep. Real estate that generates rent, dividend-paying stocks, or business equity. This creates a rigid rule for consumption. Rich people buy luxury goods, but they never use their primary capital to do it. They build the asset column first and let the cash flow from those assets purchase the luxuries. The wealthy treat every single dollar as a soldier sent out into the market to capture more wealth. The middle class sends their dollars out to die as consumer expenses. The ultimate illusion baked into traditional schooling is that securing a higher salary equals financial freedom. Mechanically, the system is designed to punish wage earners. A promotion usually triggers higher tax brackets, encourages taking on larger mortgages, and leads to the acquisition of more expensive liabilities. The treadmill just speeds up. Relying on a corporate pension, a 401k match, or government medical subsidies breeds a deep structural vulnerability. When an individual's survival relies entirely on external institutions, they live with a lifelong undercurrent of anxiety. True financial freedom requires abandoning the identity of a dependent consumer. It requires becoming a sovereign commander of your own capital. Achieving this means confronting money with objective reality. It means stripping away the academic arrogance that views wealth creation as beneath intellectual pursuits. The final imperative is defense. You relentlessly stack the asset column to build a fortress against a society that is highly optimized to extract wealth from its workers. This is why the wealthy step in to educate their own. By deliberately transferring financial literacy, they break the historical cycle of the rat race and engineer lasting independence for the next generation.